Joining us first on the line is Nick Freeman, criminal defence lawyer specialising in driving offences. Evening, Nick.
Good evening, Clive.
Have we got the law right at the moment then, do you think?
No, we definitely haven't got the law right. I mean, there's a whole host of problems that need addressing, but certainly insofar as sentence is concerned. And if you just start with basic use of a mobile phone, the sentence was increased about a year ago, I think March 2017, from 3 points to 6 points. So they doubled the penalty points. But the reality is that the police are not on the roads, they're not policing the roads, and everyone takes the view you're not going to get caught, so it's worth the risk. And what I think we need is a sentence which to some extent polices itself, so that people will be deterred simply by using the phone because they will be facing the same sort of length of disqualification as they would for drink driving. And I say that because the level of distraction for drink driving and the illegal use of a mobile phone is exactly the same. So it seems somewhat perverse to say if you're convicted of drink driving at the lowest level, you're going to be disqualified from a minimum period of 12 months. And yet if you're convicted of using a mobile phone and there are no adverse consequences, you will now get 6 points. So that's one problem. Obviously, we have the tragic case that you've referred to, where the maximum sentence is 5 years, and to all intents and purposes, the defendant received a suspended prison sentence. So, provided he does nothing wrong during that period of suspension, he receives no sentence at all. He's not really been punished, provided he keeps out of trouble. In my view, what should happen is that the sentence, which the maximum sentence is 5 years, it should be increased to 14 years. And the maximum sentence for causing death by dangerous driving should be increased from 14 years to life imprisonment. Now, that's one aspect of the problem. Years ago, we used to have a big problem with drink driving, but there is a terrible social stigma now with drink driving, which does not at the moment exist with illegal use of mobile phones.
How do we get that? How can we make people think in the same way? I mean, do you think that is the problem, that we need to kind of...
Tougher penalties, education, and hard-hitting advertising campaigns, so that people, you may remember some of the drink driving adverts. They were pretty horrendous, X-rated on normal times, and they conveyed a message which clearly is not being conveyed at the moment. Most people think, I know it's breaking the law but using the phone, but I'm going to be careful and I'll be all right. I'm not going to get caught and I'm driving slowly and I'll be all right. Or I'm going to just take a chance. And they don't realize, actually, what you're doing is exactly the same. You're taking exactly the same risk as if you were drink driving. And I ought to add, Clive, when we talk about handheld and hands-free, the level of distraction is exactly the same. So again, in my view, we shouldn't have phones in cars. They have no place in cars at all.
Really? You would not distinguish between the two?
The research shows that the level of distraction for illegal use and legal use is exactly the same, and that equates with drink driving. So if you're using your phone hands-free, that is the same level of distraction as if you're drink driving, and yet we say, as a government, that is permissible, but drink driving clearly isn't, and handheld mobile phones is not permissible either. It's a real mess and it needs addressing. There's been massive research behind this. It's not obviously what I say, it's what all the research has demonstrated. So the whole issue needs to be revamped. We need to educate motorists, we need to socially stigmatize the problem so that it's not acceptable to use a mobile phone, but people need to understand and be aware, because they control themselves and they have to realize most people would not dream of getting into a car whilst consuming alcohol or drugs, and yet they think there's very little risk whilst doing so with a mobile phone in their hand or on their lap. And that's because, one, they don't understand and appreciate the risk, and two, they're never going to get caught, and that's the reality.
Well, yes, that is a big part of it as well, policing it. Osman in Crystal Palace has just texted in. What do you make of this one? He says, I'm guilty of sending the occasional text message, but the amount of times I've seen police officers using their mobile phones on the road makes me wonder how dangerous it really is.
Well, the research shows exactly how dangerous it is, and that all that illustrates is how ignorant motorists are, and I don't mean that in a personal way. They are ill-informed about the level of distraction. And so what we have here is someone quite innocently saying, well, because the police do it, it can't really be that dangerous.
And should the police be doing it, though? I mean, they do have radios and mobiles and so on.
They have radios that they need to communicate, and they normally are two abreast. They need to get to emergencies if they're single-handed. I don't think there's an alternative, and they of course have special training, which we don't. So, in an ideal world, no, we ought to have nobody doing it. But I think the emergency services need it, and they do have special training, which does make a difference to some extent.
And others are saying that it really isn't that dangerous talking to somebody on a hands-free. You've still got your hands. You're looking through the windscreen. Isn't it just like sitting next to somebody who's in the car and having a chat with them? We don't ban that.
No, and to some extent, that there is a huge level of distraction. If you're involved in a conversation with somebody, your brain, and this is how they do the research, your brain is actually focusing on the concentration, on the conversation that's taking place. And you think, yes, I am concentrating on the road, but in reality, part of you is actually thinking about what you're going to say next, what's being said to you, whether it be on the phone or by a passenger, in the same way that if you're listening to the radio. So there's a whole host of different distractions, but what we're talking about specifically here is mobile phones, and that equates to drink driving. And if we conveyed that message to people, I think people will begin to understand, actually, this is something that we shouldn't be doing. It's not acceptable. It's incredibly dangerous. And even though I'm not likely to be caught, on the odd occasion you are caught, this 4-year-old child's life is left tragically in tatters, not because somebody set about trying to cause those injuries, but that was the unfortunate byproduct of being distracted and not concentrating. He was on his phone, he didn't see the red light, and he has basically ruined that child's life with the most horrendous injuries possible. And yes, of course, I'm sure he was of good character, of course he didn't intend to, but that's not the point. You try telling that to that child and that child's family. Quite rightly, they want justice, and they're not getting justice by a 2-year suspended sentence. And these things, we want to eliminate these things from our road. We don't want to be sentencing people. We want to be preventing them from happening. And that's why we need to revamp the whole situation by educating, conveying a message, socially stigmatizing, and people who still won't learn, then they need to be punished properly.
All right, Nick, thank you very much indeed for that. Nick Freeman joining us there, criminal defence lawyer specialising in driving offences. So we've heard the latest in a